Welcome to Oceanside Chat. I'm Helen Wang, the host and editor of the program. Today marks the end of our Season 2 webinar series, focusing on combating supply chain crisis. In the past 6 months, we have built an inclusive community that embraces multi-generational learning, intellectual curiosity, and deep thinking. Thank you so much for your support and participation throughout the entire season. It's a graduation season again, while families and friends come together to celebrate accomplishments along the educational path. So we wanted to congratulate our students who have invested all their time, energy, and hard work into completing their degrees. Best wishes for your next adventure. Now, please get ready to join me in a corporate boardroom and discuss supply chain risk oversight through a boardroom lens. For this episode, I'm fortunate to partner with my dear friend, one of the board members at the Institute for Supply Chain Excellence and Innovation at UC San Diego. Let's welcome Valerie Bonebrake, with over 30 years of industry experience in logistics services, currently an independent director at the Forward Air Corporation, and previously as a senior vice president of Tompkins International. Valerie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Helen. It's great to be with you.
So Valerie, as an accomplished female executive in the super competitive logistic industry, what would your superpower be and why?
Gosh, what is my superpower? You know, I would say if I went back to the beginning, it would be I'm risk tolerant. And back in the beginning of my career, that was about willing to take promotions or relocate or take on different jobs. And I really didn't realize that as I went through my career and now in this chapter in board service, that really risk tolerance and risk management is one of the main topics of boards across a whole host of situations. So it's worked out pretty well.
Wow.
I haven't died from anything.
Well, everybody would love to have that superpower, you know, and it is actually such a precious gift during this period of time when so much crisis is happening. Yeah.
It's helped me stay optimistic, I would say, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And what advice would you give to a smart, driven college student about to enter the real world? And what advice should they ignore?
Gosh, I would first say be flexible and really be conscious of developing your network around you, up above you, below you, and beside you in your organization and outside of your organization. Because if you start that at the beginning of your career, you will have such a rich network that you can call on for help in a host of different ways. The other thing I would say is trust your own instincts and don't worry so much about doing things in a prescribed way. Each person's journey is unique. I would try not to be judgmental, just kind of see how things go and work hard. That's about it, I think.
So follow your heart, creating your own path, and as well as the network.
If you're going to work for 40 years or whatever, it better be at something you like to do.
Right.
I would feel bad if I had worked in an industry where I didn't like my job.
Mm-hmm. One of the founding fathers of the United States, Benjamin Franklin, said, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." So this quote resonated with me as I continuously strive to learn new things and enhance my skills every day. So Valerie, what was the most recent and worthwhile investment you made?
Well, gosh, you would be surprised to know that the most recent investment was just at the end of last year. I began my study to become a certified director through the National Association of Corporate Directors. And I had to take a curated exam to achieve that certification. I studied quite a few, probably 40 hours through all the study materials that they provided. since I was already working on a board, I had a good foundation, but it was still a little anxiety taking a curated exam. And I passed, and I learned a lot through the
Congratulations.
process. Thank you. Thank you. And
Yeah,
I didn't, by the way, on that topic, Helen, I didn't achieve my master's degree until probably 20 years into my career. So I believe in continuous learning.
yeah.
It's never
And I
too
know
late.
that the certificate is not required, right? It's something really like self-motivated and self-driven, board members would probably pursue.
That's right. And the board I'm on is very supportive of continuing education. And actually, it is a criteria that investors and the proxy companies look at. So it's a smart thing to do, I think, as well.
Yeah, and congratulations also. Thank you for setting up such a great example for all of us to look up to. Keep learning.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So Valerie, now you have been serving as an independent director at the Forward Air Corporation since 2018. And
That's
could you
right.
explain the purposes and functions of a board of directors?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The board that I'm on at Forward Air is a public company board. And so as such, it's governed by not only the bylaws of the company, but the governing bodies through the SEC. And to be selected for a board position is not dissimilar to applying for a job. However, if you are selected, then there's a lot of security, background check, and things that have to happen, because the primary role is your fiduciary duty of care, and you have to be independent, not have any conflicts of interest, because the board of directors' responsibility is oversight and governance. It's not managing, it's not solving the problems, but it's really about oversight. And that, of course, includes understanding risks and determining the proper level of risk that companies, that the company can tolerate.
So who does the board of directors represent?
Well, in our case, the board of directors would always have at least one person who would qualify through the SEC to be the head of the audit committee. So because they're overseeing the financial reviews. And that typically is a chief financial officer of an ex or current chief financial officer. Most people on public boards are seasoned executives. Mm-hmm. Sometimes from the industry that they're serving, that's the role that I play. But also the smart boards have a grid that says what are the skill sets we need, and how do our board members match up to our needs and requirements. And those used to be almost solely finance oriented. Probably everybody's heard of the good old boy network, and you kind of got on a board by, through your friends and your buddies. But it's really evolved to be very important for boards to have good representation of diversity in an array of ways, so that they get the best thinking and the best contributions for the management team and for the shareholders. So boards can vary in size, depends on the size of the company. From our board, for example, has 13 members. We recently expanded it to add some additional skills. I'm very pleased to be part of a public board, and it's great learning and great experience.
Wow, that's very informational, helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'd like to pivot a little bit. If to today's topic, if you ask anyone a few years ago, nobody ever anticipated that supply chain would become a mainstream buzzword. With celebrities, world leaders, and a variety of digital media influencers, or even thought leaders, referencing supply chain to the current global crisis. And during each corporate earnings seasons, companies usually comment on subjects that had an impact on their earnings in a given quarter, or may have an impact on earnings in future quarters. Supply chain and inflation are the top subjects of earning calls for Q4 2021, last year. Mm-hmm. So there's a company called FactSet searched for the term supply chain in the conference call transcripts of all the S&P 500 companies that conducted earning conference calls from December 15 through March 14. So given the concerns in the market about supply chain disruptions, 358 companies cited the term supply chain during their earning calls for the fourth quarter, which is well above the 5-year average of 187, and very close to the current record of 362, which happened in the previous quarter, the third quarter of 2021. And then according to S&P Capital IQ, talk of supply chain and the logistics has increased up to 77.8% of costs for supply chain and a 61.2% cost for logistics. That's happened again in the fourth quarter of 2021. And those are 20 to 30% significantly higher than the pre-pandemic levels. Also as a reference, right, mentions of inflation-related words appeared in 71% of the costs, which is also up to 39.2% in the comparable period of a year ago. So the increases come as companies become progressively more concerned about the rising costs passing through their supply chains. And for example, how to pass those costs on to their customers, and then how to ensure that the supply arrives when and where and when it is needed. So Valerie, I would love for you to share your experience in the past 2.5 years. Was there an evolution you observed in the boardroom before and after pandemic?
Definitely, and I'll get to supply chain, because I would say in the case of the board I serve on, our supply chain is trucks and drivers. So probably the biggest supply chain challenge that we would talk about, and we still talk about in every board meeting, is our driver. We call it seated trucks. Are our trucks parked against the fence, or are they on the road with drivers in them? And you probably know that there's a significant driver shortage, 160,000, I want to say, and that is projected to be up to 280,000 shortage of drivers. One of the considerations is, should the age be lowered from 21 to 18 for a driver of a commercial CDL vehicle over the road. So that's our supply chain. One of my colleagues that I talked to on the board that he serves on, he said, I asked, has supply chain been a topic at your board? And he said, not until recently. And I said, well, why is that? He said, well, because everything was working fine. Mm-hmm. And, boards have tight agendas. We meet about 5 times a year. A lot of the work is done in the committees before the board meeting. But if you think about all the roles of strategy oversight, M&A oversight, risk oversight, crisis oversight, CEO succession planning, monitoring of the financials, including ethics and compliance, the ESG, environmental, social, and governance, our agendas are very full. Mm-hmm. And probably one that rose quickly the last 5 years has been cybersecurity. Everyone has had a lot of vulnerabilities in that area. So really, I think, Helen, as you quoted in your statistics, the pandemic really put a lens on the supply chain. And we saw it manifest, first of all, in our everyday lives, trying to get masks, and for the shortage of PPE in the medical arena, in any kind of first responder arena. We learned, whoa, we don't even make that stuff here. We can't get it. Then we had the backup of the shipping containers. There's still, you live on the West Coast, you can probably go to the port of Oakland and see that barrage still waiting. So in my career, prior to joining the board, I was a supply chain consultant for about 8 years. most of that around supply chain strategy, including, where should we be sourcing from and from where should we be distributing from. And my boss, Jim Tompkins, all the time preached about that supply chain should be in the boardroom. And he had and has a terrific reputation as a thought leader. And so he talked to hundreds of CEOs all the time about how is your supply chain working? How are you measuring it? But the one of the glaring problems still is how deep are you going in your supply chain? If you think about it from source to shelf, what is the source? It's not just your tier 1 supplier. What about your tier 2 suppliers and your tier 3 suppliers? We're certainly seeing that now expanded and highly critical because of the products that come from Russia and Ukraine. So then on top of the pandemic, we have the impact of that conflict.
So very interesting when one of your colleagues, another board members for a different company, talking about recently supply chains entered into the boardroom, and why is that? Because things used to work fine, now it's no longer. I'm just wondering about where do you see the trigger point? Is that because all the lists that you have shared earlier, right? The supply chain is not really there, but maybe supply chain is hidden somewhere. So I'm wondering about where is the trigger point? Is that because revenue? Is that because customer? Is that because supplier? What's your view about that?
Well, I can give you, in this specific example that I'm talking about, it really hit the balance sheet. So this company is a manufacturer of heavy equipment. A completed piece of equipment can cost upwards of $500,000. What started happening was the inability to get all the components of things that you might think of as rather basic, like harnesses and wiring harnesses and cylinders, metal bands, things like that they need to complete the product. So the impact of not being able to complete those products on a timely basis caused their work in process, incomplete units, to stay on their books in inventory, quadrupling that cost that they were carrying on their balance sheet. And so that affects your borrowing, it affects your credit. And so when that hits your financials, then that really gets a lens in the boardroom. And I asked, well, what was this a surprise, in the boardroom, and why wasn't it ever talked about? And he, like I said, well, we didn't know it was a problem. And so our lesson learned there was we have to have early warning signals.